Hey guys, welcome to today's bookish video. Today we're going to be talking about books that are short. Books that are under 200 pages long. I've been wanting to film this video for a while because I've always been intrigued by the idea of reading a book a day, and this sometimes happens during September, some people do it during February, and that obviously is more attainable if you are reading shorter books. And so I thought I would highlight some of the books that I have previously read that are under 200 pages, and some that are on my TBR that are under 200 pages. I don't know if I'm going to be doing, participating in this a story a day this year or next, or if ever, but I would like to at some point in my life, and if you guys are interested, I wanted to give a bunch of book ideas for you. And I want to make note that there's no actual middle grade on this list. There's no manga, no graphic novels, and no really short stories. These are all would be considered probably like novellas. These are like physical books that the entire book is less than 200 pages. I didn't want to just share 30 different short story ideas with you. I wanted actual books that are short. So let's just dive in. We're going to start with the ones that I have read that are fiction, and I would recommend these. These are books that I still own, so they were that good that I kept them. Then I have some non-fiction that are under 200 pages, and then I have a TBR stack of, I think they're all fiction, books that I want to read that are under 200 pages. So with the books that I've read, obviously I'm going to recommend these all since I have kept them, I've enjoyed them. The first one I'm going to start with is Agatha Christie's The Moving Finger. The cover on this edition that I own is much creepier than the actual story is, but this is the first Agatha Christie that I read with Miss Marple, and it made me fall in love with her. And it's not that Miss Marple's really in the story a ton. She's not really. Some people are disappointed sometimes when they read their first Miss Marple and realize she's just a very background character, but that is a lot of the reason why I love her, because she is just so unassuming. And in this one, this one has to do with letters that people are in this town are receiving, and people are dying, as always. I don't know if this one is truly a whodunit that can be solved. Some of hers are. I can't remember the details, but I don't really think so. Next up, we've got another Golden Age classic mystery story, and that is Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers. This book comes in under 190 pages in my edition, 191. And I guess I should have said, The Moving Finger is at 189 pages. This is a story where we get introduced to the detective of the series. His name is Lord Peter Wimsey, and in this one there is a body of a man found in a bathtub in an architect's flat, and also at the same time a famous guy disappears. And so we're introduced to this detective, and I've heard good things about the series. I do keep meaning to continue the series. I haven't yet. Okay, this one maybe, I don't know. I do think people should read it. It is not my favorite book ever, but I have read it before, and that is Animal Farm by George Orwell. This is a book that I had to read in high school, and just turned around now and made my daughter read it as well. This one, my edition, clocks in at 95 pages, so it is very short. It is a look at communism, and it is quite well done. I still just hold to the fact that I'm not huge into animals being characters in stories, apparently not even necessarily in this form, but I think it is an important book to read. Another classic, I promise you these are not all classics on this list. We've got Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. My edition here is about 124 pages, and I think this is a fairly famous story where we've got Dr. Jekyll who is doing some experiments, and he somehow creates this second persona called Mr. Hyde, and it is quite a dark story, very interesting look though. Definitely a classic that you should read. I think this is, well, okay, there's more classics at the end of this stack, but this is the last one for a little bit. We've got A Christmas Carol. A lot of people read A Christmas Carol every single year. I am not one of those people, but I have read it multiple times, and I am one of those maybe strange people. My preferred way to watch A Christmas Carol is definitely the Disney like Mickey's Christmas Carol. So my edition here has 126 pages, And this is the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, who has been living for riches for a long time, and the night before Christmas, his old business partner who died, Jacob Marley, comes and haunts him and tells him he's going to be visited by 3 ghosts over the course of the night, ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, and gives Scrooge a chance to change his ways. I definitely think everyone should read this one at least once in their life as well. Okay, if you want a short book and you want to be crying by the end, which is something that I think that authors who write short stories, not short stories, but like novellas, well, this book is only 76 pages. If you can, oh, and there's pictures, like there's whole pages, I haven't even shown you the book yet, there's whole pages that are just a picture. This one is, and every morning the way home gets longer and longer. I realize I have left a bunch of sentences unfinished. It drives my husband nuts when I do that. An author that can write a short story or a short novella well, make you feel for the characters and do it in such few pages, I think is more of a master than an author that can write a 500-page book well. This book is the story of a grandfather talking to his grandson, and the grandfather he has dementia or something like that, and he's just telling his grandson about life. And let me tell you, 76 pages, I had tears streaming down my face by the time I was done with this book. It's a tearjerker, but it's a good one. Next up, we've got the first novella in a series. This is Spines and Leaves by Chantel Havig. This is a series about bookstores. We follow the main character named Milton, who helps businesses who are struggling kind of get back on their feet, and he just so happens to help a bunch of bookstores. So there's 2 novellas and then the first full-length novel, and she's currently writing the series still, and I just fell in love with the idea of running a bookstore. Milton has a parrot, and there were just so many cool like bookish quirks and quotes, and I love Chantel Havig's sense of humor. It is 100% up my alley, so I definitely think if you like books, which, I mean, if you're here, you probably do, you might like a book about a bookstore. Another series that has a bunch of novellas and then I think goes into full-length novels is the Murderbot series. So the first book is All Systems Red. To be honest, I have only read the first book in this series. This one is about 148 pages. I did forget to say for this one. It is 112 pages, no, 110 pages for the story. So this one we follow a robot who is supposed to be like an assassin robot, I believe. It's been a number of years since I read it, but this robot just wants to like watch soap operas all day, and so it's an interesting look at the mind of a robot, and I think they are on a distant planet as well, and then things kind of go down. It's a short book and it's been a few years since I read it, so I don't want to give anything away, but it was interesting and I do think I might continue the series at some point. Okay, we've got a couple more classics here. The first one being The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, and I read The Turn of the Key, which I believe Ruth Ware based off of this book first, and then I read this one and I thoroughly enjoyed this. It did not feel as old as it is. So this edition has 144 pages. This book was originally written, well, of course my edition doesn't say, but it is a classic. It was first serialized in 1898. So this is the story of a young governess that goes to work at a house, and there's 2 children that she's supposed to work with, and they like seem to see things. It's definitely got some creepy elements going on, and I, like I said before, I just enjoy it when an author can tell such a good story in such a short amount of pages. I may have lied a tiny little bit to my knowledge at the beginning of this video, because this book I think clocks in at 209 pages. It is the Screwtape Letters. I believe mine ends at 209. But in my defense, at the end of every chapter there's like a completely blank page. So if you get rid of all those blank pages, of which there are more than 20 of them, you're under 200 pages. So the Screwtape Letters is one of my favorite books by C.S. Lewis, but I have a few. And this is the story of a head demon writing letters to his demon in training. I think maybe he's his nephew. And this demon in training named Wormwood, oh, isn't that such a wonderful name, has this man who just became a Christian, and he's trying to lure him away from the faith. And so Screwtape, I think is the actual, yeah, the uncle is Screwtape. He is giving tips to Wormwood for how to lure this man away from the faith and back into the world. And I just think it is so fascinating to like think about what is going on in the spiritual world. And yes, 100%. I'm actually going to get my daughter to read this book really soon because I think it's something every Christian should read. Okay, well, this one is a very different note. We've got The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Mine is 184 pages. And this is a little bit absurd. So we've got Arthur Dent. I'm just going to read this because it's funny. Arthur Dent is already having a really bad day, even before the Earth gets demolished to make way for a new hyperspace bypass. After that, things get much, much worse. With just a towel, a small yellow fish, and a book, Arthur has to navigate through a very hostile universe in the company of a gang of unreliable alien oddballs. Luckily, the fish is quite good at languages. If you want something absurd, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the way to go, I guess. Okay, I've got another C.S. Lewis book. This one is Out of the Silent Planet. And I will say I am not the hugest fan of classic science fiction. I feel like they kind of all read the same, and I'm not 100% up for the vibe, but this is a series, it's a trilogy that I want to continue. So I have read the first book, Out of the Silent Planet, and I want to continue the series. My edition has 158 pages, and this is the story of a man who is abducted by a megalomaniacal physicist and his accomplice. I don't think I said that right. They're going up in a spaceship, these men, and they need someone pretty much to sacrifice to the creatures of the planet that they're going to. And so this is the story of what happens, and I will finish this series at some point in my life. One more classic science fiction for you. We've got Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, and my edition comes in at 120 pages. And this is the story of Phineas Fogg as he goes around the world in 80 days. It starts out, I think it was a bet, and he goes around the world and we follow him to all these different places. It's a little bit unbelievable, but it is a pretty fun story. Oh, I found a Sherlock book that I could suggest here as well. My copy of The Hound of the Baskervilles is around 190 pages, and this gives you a decent look into Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock. If you haven't read any, I highly recommend that you do so. My favorite are the other books that are the short story collections though, The Adventures of Sherlock, The Memoirs of Sherlock, etc. But this one fit under the page mark and the other ones didn't, so I wanted to add this one to the list as well. So those were my fiction. Now we're going to go into my non-fiction. I have two books of poetry that we may as well start with. The first one here is The Poetry of Emily Dickinson. She is one of my favorite poets. This book has, there's so many different collections of her books as well. This one has 184 pages. I also own a copy of the complete Emily Dickinson poetry, and I think that one clocks in around 800 pages, but her poems are all very short, so this may not be something you necessarily want to read the entire thing in a day, but you could read a couple pages a day, and then over the course of the month you could easily finish this, because some of her poems are only 4 to 8 lines long, and even her longest ones are much shorter than some other poets. She writes a lot about nature, and I just love reading her poems. A new to me poet that I found this year is Brittany Litster. This one is Wildflower Pages. I came across her on Instagram, and this one has 153 pages, and her poetry as well is very short. We're talking like 4 to maybe like 12 lines long. They're just short little snippets. Once again, you could read a couple of these a day over the course of the month. You know, you read a couple of these in the morning, you read a couple Emily Dickinson in the evening, and then you'll finish these two books. Brittany Litster's are very much about faith and creation, and I enjoyed a lot of these poems when I read them earlier this year. One more book I forgot to add is 84 Charing Cross Road. My edition clocks in at like 98 pages, I think. This is a true story. These are true letters that were written from a lady that was a writer in the United States to a British bookseller. He didn't sell bookstores, he sold books. And I loved this book. It was such a good look. They wrote during the Second World War and continued, and it was really cool to see their relationship form, friendship, and just how she got to know like other people in the bookstore as well, just through the letters she exchanged with this guy and later with others. Next up, I've got The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn. And this is a teeny little book, plus it only has about 120 pages. And this is Unlocking the Secret of Joyful Giving, which I feel like sums up the entire book right there. This is one I would like to reread because I remember it being very powerful. If you ever feel like, well, even if you don't feel like you need to reevaluate your spending, you should read this book. Everyone should read it. I was super excited when I saw this book was 191 pages. Barely squeezed it in there. But this is You and Me Forever by Frances Chan and Lisa Chan. This is my favorite marriage book. And I say that with quotations because it's not really about marriage. The subtitle is Marriage in Light of Eternity, but I do feel like it is more like life in light of eternity. Living with the end in mind. I have read this through multiple times, highlighted multiple things, given this out to friends. There's crayon on here from people's kids. I have loved and used this book, and I feel like it has changed the way I live. So I highly recommend it, especially if you are married. You guys need to read it together. And I would even recommend it to people that aren't married because I think there's a lot people can get out of here. Okay, Women of the Word by Jen Wilkin, another one that surprised me on the length. It is only 152 pages. So once again, the subtitle sums this one right up. How to study the Bible with both our hearts and our minds. And if you want to know how to study the Bible, this is a great place to start. Although it is another one of those books, like the next one coming up, where they use the word woman, I think is a marketing ploy to get more people to read it. But it's too bad because it shies men away from reading it when it's just as applicable to men. Okay, my last nonfiction is Every Woman a Theologian. And I did just manage to spill an entire cup of water on the table right before I started. So this is unfortunately one of the books that got wet. My dust jacket is wet, so I'm just gonna leave it off for a bit. So this is, I think I would reword this book to be Theology for Dummies. That's how I would reword this because it's just the basics of theology, but put into like simple terms so that people like me who don't have a lot of background for theology can understand what's going on. Every Christian, once again, needs to read this book. We're just gonna let this dry a little bit. And now we're gonna finish things up with the books that are on my TBR that I have not read, obviously that's why they're to be read, that are under 200 pages. So the first one, I have two different editions of this, and they're both under 200 pages. These ones are Agatha Christie's Destination Unknown. I'm quite confused myself on these covers, to be honest. Based off of this, I was kind of assuming it maybe wouldn't... Okay, this is a thriller. According to this Sunday Times, Agatha Christie gives us one of her rare thrillers in place of a detective story. So apparently I just need to go into this knowing that this is a thriller and not a detective story. But my editions are like 190 pages and 191 pages, so right there. Then I've got What Katie Did. This one is 175 pages, and honestly, I don't know anything about this book. Maybe this one would be considered a middle grade because our main character is 12-year-old Katie Carr. She is forever dreaming of the important things she will do one day. But I'm considering it as a classic, maybe classic children's fiction, but originally published in 1872. It's just one that I know I want to read, so I added that to the list. This one is fun. It is The Life and Times of Miss Jane Marple by Anne Hart. And I got this one actually sent to me by Shatona Havig, who has a book on this list. And this is just a delightful biography about Jane Marple, who is not an actual person. And I just was flipping through and saw the words The Moving Finger, which is another book that's on this list. So this is one I'm excited to read. It's a delightful and affectionate profile of Agatha Christie's famous amateur sleuth. Definitely got to read this one soon. A book that I just hauled very recently is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and this edition is 184 pages. The tale of a man who built himself an illusion to live by. I honestly don't know anything about this story, but it is one that I would like to check off my classics list. Then I have two books by James Herriot. This one's not very interesting because it doesn't have a dust jacket. This one is Animal Stories, and we have Cat Stories. These ones are, I think, right around the 150 page mark, and he was a vet in England, and he just wrote a bunch of stories. I haven't read any of his yet, even though I own a few. So I should probably get on reading at least some of these this year. One that I want to read this spring still, before spring is over, is Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster. My edition is 181 pages, although it is fairly short. So if it was a bigger, regular sized edition, it would probably be less pages. And this is about a girl who has been sent to college by a benefactor of sorts, and she doesn't know who he is, but she just knows that she has to write to him once a week. And so I'm very curious about this one. We have 3 more left. We've got The Outsiders, another one I need to read ASAP. This one is 156 pages. And like I said when I hauled this one recently, all I know is that we have a character named Ponyboy and one named Soda Pop. So I need to learn more. My last two are both by the same author. We've got Terry Blackstock. This one is The Gifted. It is 129 pages, and I don't know anything about it. I think this is more of like a supernatural fiction kind of book. This one also got a little bit wet. And then The Heart Reader of Franklin Hyde, which I know even less about. This one is right around, it's 136 pages. Also might be a little bit like supernatural fiction of sorts. Supernatural suspense, I'm not really sure. But there you go. There are about 30, I didn't actually count them, books that are 200 pages or less, with the one exception, that I either recommend or would like to read myself. And if you guys have suggestions, recommendations for short books, leave them in the comments. I would love that to be a resource for when I do eventually try to take on an entire month of reading a book a day, and then hopefully other people that want to do the same can use it as a resource as well. I hope you guys have a great week.